Welcome to Vitamin OC. I'm Joanna Weiss.
And I'm Whitney Gomez. Every week we bring you your recommended dose of Vitamin OC, Civics and Civilization here in Orange County.
We are so excited to bring back a guest that you've met before. We have Greg Kaplan with us again. He is the founder of Kaplan Educational Group, and we are so excited to have him here. Before we spoke about parents navigating the college admission process, and today we're going to talk about students.
And Greg, you are the author of two very helpful books. The first is Earning Admission, and this goes through all of the steps of helping families and students put together their application. This is our focus for today. In an earlier podcast, we talked about the journey, which I would like to think is also your journey from the nuts and bolts to kind of the bigger picture. I also really highly recommend this to our listeners.
So you talk about how we can successfully navigate the college admission process. But in doing that, I guess one of the things you talked about last time was what success looks like, and that for each child, it might look different. And so can you talk with us about what you would consider success while navigating the college admission process?
When I started doing this, I bought into the mantra of the outcome is what matters. And I think it was because that's what people were chasing. And even I look back at my own 18-year-old self many, many moons ago, and that's what I was after. But today I would define success is a young person prepared to grow into a healthy, happy, and financially independent adult. Because that is what an education should help a child do, is open up doors for them to discover who they are, what makes them tick, and how they can sustain themselves. So for me, it is less important, and it's amazing when students get into really selective schools, and that is an amazing validation, especially given how hard kids work today. But do they have trajectory? Are they making progress? Do they have momentum with where they're heading? Because I think that's what they're going to need, and that's what this process should reward.
And I think what's really nice about your process, just in listening to you speak, at least to my own children, the elements that you ask them to put into their high school years are really preparing them for later. And I think I'm remembering this correctly, Greg, but I think you strive to help kids build grit, leadership, and passion.
You got it.
Okay. Can you talk to us a little bit about those?
Yeah, let's start with grit. Grit is one's ability to deal with life's day-to-day challenges. And in a world marked by kids dropping out of college because they don't like their roommates, or kids bringing millennials, they're not kids anymore. These are people theoretically in their 40s who are bringing mom and dad to job interviews, or mom and dad are doing their jobs for them, or mom and dad are threatening, because this has been brought up to me a few times in my practice, suing school districts because their kids are getting Bs. That is grit, is can your child actually deal with the world? Because regardless of where they go to school, that is separate and apart from it. We always tell students, especially if they come from a place like Newport Beach, you need to go get a part-time job, because the only thing mom and dad cannot help you do in this world is diffuse World War III when you put the wrong milk in a latte. And that life skill is so important. Prior to us starting our recording today, we were talking about working at a large law firm or on the trading floor. My first summer internship, like I'll call it my big boy job, was at an investment bank in New York City. The person sitting next to me was an MIT student, was probably the most gifted modeler, probably the most technically qualified for the job in our entire analyst class. And I think it went to his head, because not once did he ever offer our admin, did you need help putting together a pitch deck? Not once did he ever offer anyone who was stuck on conference calls, can I go get you coffee downstairs? And at the end of the summer, the two greatest things happened to me was, one, they made me an offer because I was not the best modeler. I was more relying on my interpersonal skills to get hired. And then two, he did not get a job. And they told me in my exit interview, welcoming back for next summer, so we can teach you how to be a banker. We cannot teach you how to be a team player. And so when I look in this world where everyone's like, oh, how do I get, whatever fancy prize so I can get into Harvard? Are we missing that fundamental? I'm like, can you be a team player? Can you deal with other people's problems? And when life's uncomfortable, because life is uncomfortable more often than we want, especially more often than we want for our kids, can you just deal?
Okay, so for the grit, get a summer job and get a food service job, get something where you are serving others, perhaps?
I think so. Just dealing with very difficult people, because that's such an important life skill now. So it's a nice also check in the mirror. Your daughter worked in an acai shop. I think the grittier, the better, the more people, the better. Anything other than mommy and daddy enterprises, because that defeats the purpose. But if you're working in a retail job, that could qualify as well. But I think anything that involves customer service, because that is there's so many different avenues for that. I think in 2025, where the minimum wage is today, where hiring is, with the automation of certain tasks and like those annoying keypads instead of people taking your order.
Right.
I think we have to be flexible. It's nice to do food service because that is so gritty, but I think anything as long as it's not mommy and daddy enterprises.
Okay. And I've seen many studies that students who have done chores growing up, there's a big correlation with later success. So would you say maybe have your kids sweeping out the garage, obviously clearing their place? Are there other things at home that you think we can do to develop grit?
I think absolutely. I think it's never too early to help young people discover responsibility and the teamwork that comes from it. A young person doing chores is going to learn sooner rather than later that mom and dad are not going to be doing their homework as well, that mom and dad aren't going to be problem solving at high school. That's different for every kid and their schedules. And I think personal, domestic responsibilities, like they should have a seat at the table. I think at a bare minimum, keeping one's room clean and organized. I think that is something that it's not too much to ask of a young person, but I think that's different for every person. So I think,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think on leadership, you're going to say it's not just the titles. We've got to really get into it. So talk to us about leadership.
I think leadership, and within the lens of college admissions, I think a lot of us are like, oh, my kid's going to run for student body president, or they're going to be, editor in chief of the school newspaper or of a club. But for me, titles do not matter. It's the impact that person has. Are you developing the perspective how to bring out the best in others? And are you recognizing the unmet needs that you can address, whether in your community, society at large, in your school? Because being a leader is about making an impact. And I think we look at political leaders, CEOs, but leadership can be quiet and not everyone needs to be a public figure. And because that's not appropriate for every kid, but what they will be rewarded for in their growth is if they learn how to understand, okay, this is somewhere I can make a difference. And I want to because this matters to me. And so I think we just have to have a very broad version of that word because kids are so different today. And we also live in a world where you could gather 1 million signatures online through a petition and make an enormous impact. Or just by simply speaking up and speaking about lived experiences can spark a movement. And so we want to honor that with technology today, as pervasive and corrosive as it can be for a lot of social skills, young people today can be leaders in ways that we didn't have the chance to be when we were their age. And so let them find their way to do it. As long as they're making an impact, I'm okay.
And I think the third factor is passion. We spoke a little bit about passion last time you were here, and that passion can be a buzzword these days. And so what way should they be thinking about passion? Because it isn't always that they're passionate about finding the cure to cancer when they're 16 years old. But how can they develop their passion? How can parents support them? And what do you mean by passion?
There's different ways to define it. Within college admissions, I would say there's 2 different ways I like to at least frame this. One, what motivates you academically? What is that class that if I could take one class away and double the other class, what would you double? For me in high school would have been, let's double up on history, get rid of math. And so what is it that you would actually lose sight of time doing? And how can I nurture that? If you love, call it American politics, like, can you go volunteer at the Nixon Library? If you live in Orange County, do you want to take a class at OCC in the summer? Do you want to work on a political campaign? And then it's also, what is it that you think you may want to do in the future? How can we get you to explore this? We have students who are truly passionate about the environment. I had a student the other day research, just like, did you know, Greg, that commercial landlords are required to put recycling bins in every tenant's office? I was like, I had no idea. And then the student then emailed me the California law that said this, and I just forwarded it to the property manager for my office. I'm like, that's really dark.
Wait, he was calling out your office for not having them?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And then I had to be like, sometimes I like take my paper cans and bring them back home and then I recycle.
Funny.
But I was like, that's passion. That's passion for someone to even know that. And I thought that
and to notice the environment and care. And that's great.
We have a student that is trying to get people in the community to just the fruit that's growing on their trees, let it, rather than it go to waste. How can we get it over to a food bank? How can we get healthy food? I'm like, that's just cool that you're seeing something and you care enough about your fellow neighbors to recognize that not everyone, we take produce at a Gelson for granted. But to me, that's passion, that you actually stop to think and care and then act on it. So it's that, are you going to act on it? And that's what we want for our kids at the end of the day, is are they going to be a self-starter? They're like, I'm going to go do. And that to me is, if passion is that force that prompts you to do rather than mom and dad nagging incessantly.
I love that example you gave of the, which classes would you double up on and which one would you drop? I remember hearing an anecdote a long time ago when my kids were younger about if you have a kid who really enjoys tennis, they're not so good at math. Most parents are going to get them a math tutor and then put less time towards tennis. But maybe we need to frame things of maybe they don't need a math tutor. Maybe you put that money into tennis lessons and let them pursue that passion. And that's one of the ways to support your kids is passion isn't necessarily always going to be academically related, that there are kids who want to pursue academics, sports, music, etc.
I'm 100% with you. I always say there's a caveat to that, which is like, let's just not forsake fundamentals, because there's a lot of stuff like we love passion, but then there's also the 95% of the time where it's like, okay, you have a job to do. And that's what I always say with no one's passionate about test prep. And if they are, you could have a whole podcast on that's your passion. Okay, we need to help. We need intervention. If you're passionate, people would have said that to me about college admission. Okay, who am I to judge? But I think we have to also say at the same time, this is not your passion, but this is going to help you grow. And you're going to need this for potentially when that is your passion. If someone is passionate about tennis, I love it. Even if there's a lot of kids that do this because these are very popular clubs at Sage, at CDM, at St. Margaret's, Acing Autism. We have kids who do Friendship Circle and they're teaching tennis to kids who are on the autism spectrum. That's great. You can broaden it. We have students who take cultural anthropology classes to understand why is the sports culture so different when we were kids? Because it is so different, for better or for worse. And so there are ways, it's a launching pad, but it's like, okay, you get it. How can we build on it?
Okay, we want to talk to you about the whole application, but before we go there, and I'm not generalizing here, but suppose a high school boy walks into your office and he loves his sport, but he's probably not going to play in college, loves those video games, isn't really involved in much else. What advice do you give that family?
Okay, I'm glad you're asking this because I think it's okay. It's like, you're not alone, mom and dad. This is the norm, but you have to meet your kid for where they're at and not impose your version of them onto it. Yes, it is okay to let them have, but it's okay also to set limits. Our pediatrician told my mom, you're not there to be the best friend. You are there also to like set rules. And I think there's that balance. So where you're not then caving in because, and I see this in my practice where a parent will come off very hard, like no video games. And then they feel like they overstepped and then they have to cave in and provide the video games. So A, what is that balance for video games? And then B, it's okay to talk about, maybe to engage them on it. Like I've had conversations with students who I could not get 2 words out of their mouth. I'm like, tell me the strategy of this game. I'm like, okay, you're already thinking 3 steps ahead. And then I'm building up the kid. And I think this is the advice I'd give to a parent is find something that may be translatable to real life that you could then build on. Like, okay, what else is that? That could be, for an example, could be litigation and law. There's a strategy to it. It's like you're filing a certain brief or motion, trying to get that step 12 steps ahead. And that kid's like, oh, that's kind of cool. I'm like, okay, now we need to go see what a lawyer actually does to make sure that, because that in theory sounds cool too. But I think it's all about that and asking them, how can we have a kid who doesn't want to do anything other than video games, be in the driver's seat to do something, but sometimes that takes a little bit of prodding. And you have to be creative if it's a video game, especially if you hate the video game and you feel it's turning your kid's brain to mush. Or the social media. It's like, what do you like about that? What about that communication pattern is so interesting to you? And how can we find something that's maybe tangentially related to it and say, you just got to try. And if you don't like it, we got to keep trying. I don't care if a kid doesn't like something. I just only care. I'm like, did you at least try? Because if they try, maybe you'll find something and it's iterative.
One of the things that you're known for, Greg, is helping kids be very strategic when choosing activities. For example, if a kid is already writing for their school paper, you'll suggest that they publish it, submit it somewhere else and for publication. Do you have any other hacks for being strategic about your activities?
Yeah, I think it's quality, not quantity. That's the most important thing. I always say to families, the 2 most important ingredients in 2025, and I expect this to continue in the years to come, are impact and authenticity. Can you make a real impact? Writing for, call it Sage's newspaper, The Bolt. You can then go write for the LA Times High School Insider program. Or if you're truly passionate about a certain topic, can we enter a writing contest where you're already doing the work? These kids are under so much pressure. I never like to add new activities, or I'm trying to save stuff for the summers because it's just not fair. I was over involved in high school, but then when I got to Penn, I pretty much stopped every activity after my freshman year because I needed a break. And I think a lot of our kids are needing that break earlier. I think also the big thing that we should talk about is a healthy relationship with sports. I wrote about that in The Journey. Only 6% of athletes get recruited. So that means if we can do the basic math, 94% of high school athletes are not going to go to college for their sport. You can walk onto the team, you can try a new sport, and that's great. But where I struggle, I think the most is when I see a student who says, I have X or Y dream, and the dream is lofty, but I'm not willing to invest the time for that dream. And it's okay because for me, I'm not a school snob. Reform school snob, but it's okay if we're like, okay, if we're shooting for some school with a 1% acceptance rate, it may not afford you the chance to play that sport the way you want to play it. And that's okay if you choose the sport over the illusory option to go to a Stanford. but how can we save time for the bare minimum to grow? And so it's the part-time job in the summer. Service, to me, especially growing up in a place like coastal Orange County, it's a non-negotiable because we're so divorced from reality at times. And then where can we find passion strategically? So that's why in the last episode that we recorded, we spoke about, summer needing the break. There's sometimes I'm just like, you may not get as much of a break as you wanted, but this is your chance to contribute to research. This is your chance to take that extra class. This is your chance to shadow that doesn't exist in the school year. So a lot of times I ask students, it's not the strategy, it's the timing. And I get a lot more buy-in. I'm like, hey, it's not so bad. It's this little part of summer. And then you can work as a family to figure out the fun stuff of summer, travel, beach, etc. But sometimes it's just knowing where to put the activity and then avoiding any of the fluff. There's so much fluff. All the mailers as parents that you guys get, this little honors conference because they bought your data off the College Board for a great PSAT score, is skipping all of that. It's knowing, okay, we're going to march to our own beat and just do stuff that my kid wants to do because it's going to be their authenticity. It's like, who cares what anyone else is doing down the street?
That's great advice.
It seems like there's a cascade from the transcript and the courses to the activities to the essay. So starting out high school, the first thing you do is pick your courses and then you start getting into the activities. Can you kind of walk us through that cascade and how you think about a college application?
Yeah. And I tell all families that come to my office this exact same story of how the process works. The college application process is a two-step process. Step one is a review of the numbers, which consists of an applicant's high school transcript. And then if they're applying to a school that requires the SAT or the ACT or it's optional, that score as well. And if collectively, if those numbers meets the academic standards that the admissions officer set for the applicant pool, then it's no longer a function of who has better grades or who has better test scores. That's when they're going to open up the application and they're going to read the activity descriptions and essays to understand the answer to one key question, which is, what is this applicant's ability to add value to that university? And that's told through the essays. And those essay questions are asking, what have you done to make your school or community a better place? That's the leadership question. How have you explored your academic interests outside the classroom? That's the passion question. We know the questions they're going to ask. And there's been so many changes in higher ed, but the UCs ask the exact same questions they did when I applied to college 20 years ago. USC asks the exact same question. So we know what they're looking for. The question is how can we engage in experiences that help kids answer that question persuasively and authentically?
And one of the things I think that's been driving so much of this and probably why you're busy and successful is so many people have questions about the college application process because it has gone through so many changes over the last couple of decades. Can you tell us a little bit about why you believe it's changed so much and any prognostication about where it might be going?
Happy to. And just take this for a grain of salt. It's just one person's opinion. First off, I think it's important to recognize that this process is intentionally opaque. We don't know. I always tell students when you get in, and I'm always happy when a student gets into their dream school. I'm like, they're always like, what do you think it was? I was like, I have no idea. You may have gotten lucky. The person may have gotten engaged that day or loved their breakfast sandwich, whatever it may be. You had some very good juju on your end that pushed you over the edge. There's been a litigation all the way up to the Supreme Court challenging the use of race in college admissions. And they've been subpoenaed, and there's been so many document productions where you're seeing the notes on application files are so sparse. So they're like a little comment, like a plus next to like a little line in an essay, because you can request at some schools your applications, then the review, and then the notes. And I have siblings, older siblings who do that so they can pass on some wisdom to their younger siblings. And they're like, there was nothing on there. I'm like, yeah, I could have told you that. And so it's intentionally opaque. With that said, they're going to try to hide the ball of what does it take. But we have to recognize that for a lot of parents listening to this, when they were applying to college, particularly private universities, whether it's a USC or an Ivy League university, you didn't have the same type of financial aid that we do today or did up until quite recently. And so it was more of a privilege rather than an expectation that young people would go to college. Over the last 40 years, these universities have gone to such great lengths to expand their reach into pockets of our society that historically did not send kids to college. And it's not on the basis of race, it's very on the income. And there is quite a lot of correlation in the United States on that. Now, I have students who go to Title I schools and the reps are going there, and reps from schools that don't necessarily give off the Title I, which means half of the kids qualify for free or reduced price lunch. Those are the USCs, the Vanderbilts of the world. I don't think that was the case when I went to a very, the equivalent of like a Corona Del Mar high school in San Diego. The fancy schools were always at Torrey Pines High School, but I don't think they were down in South County, San Diego. That's not the case. Even very small liberal arts schools. And I also think that the way that the labor force has changed in the last 30 years, so much of the jobs that advance in society, law, engineering, medicine, everything that I want my kid to be X, did require a college degree. It remains to be seen with AI what that will look like, because we're at the precipice of AI fundamentally changing white-collar work. So now there's even Randy Weingarten, who's the president of the American Federation of Teachers, is saying that not everyone needs to go to college. We should be okay with that. From a teacher, I never heard that message in school. And so I do think there will be a lot more questions about the value of a college education, particularly because so many people to go to a school today have to take out so much debt, which is so hard to overcome. But I do suspect that the schools that we all covet for our kids, the high brand recognition names, are going to remain extremely competitive. I predict that there'll be a flight to quality where the applicant pools will stay incredibly large at the UCs, at the Ivies and their equivalents. And I think you'll see a lot of smaller schools close and struggle. What we're seeing for the first time this year that I've never seen, except for 2021-ish in like the peak pandemic, is a lot of movement off the wait list. I've seen students get off the wait list at Vanderbilt this year, Northwestern, Michigan, UCLA. Even the UCs, I think affordability is going to be a huge, huge, huge problem. And I don't know how higher ed changes in respect to that, but the changes need to be about affordability. And I think, unfortunately, what we're going to see is the Newport Beaches of the world are always going to be very well represented at these universities. We're going back to what it was in the 50s and 60s. I think the progress we made in expanding the pot is probably going to contract, and it may make it easier to get into some of these really selective schools for those who can pay. It just may be an unconventional route to get there off of a wait list. And I think these schools are going to become much more need aware because they're going to be much more careful with allocating parts of their endowment.
Greg, for my family, you've been so helpful in knowing the nuts and bolts of all of the changes, sometimes week to week, month to month. So for people who are going through this process, getting your insights into how things are changing, testing alone is something that we could talk about for a long, long time, and the changes there. But this is why Greg is so valuable, because he's got his both thumbs in the pie all the time, learning what's going on.
Well, and I think it's just more than like policies. And I thank you for that. I really do appreciate the compliment. Someone who's effective in navigating this process, or as a family, because you don't necessarily need help, but you do need to understand that higher ed is kind of it represents a lot of social change. And there's also, these schools do have agendas. And I think that's been really attacked in the last couple of years. It's become a political issue. But at the end of the day, these schools want to admit students who, as alumni, will represent those brands well and make an impact. It's a lifelong relationship with the university you attend, in theory. I have issues with my alma mater as it's handled anti-Semitism in the last couple of years. So it's interesting when things happen, but they want students, when I tell students that when they're like, I can finish with Spanish 3 because I've done my 3 years and that's what's recommended for the UCs, I'll also say like, gosh, but we all know that students who have language skills have more job opportunities coming out of college. So that admissions officer wants to see you go to Spanish 4 if that's within your wheelhouse. So it's understanding where's the world heading and how does education prepare a young person for that? Because it's one thing to know like, okay, you need the SAT or ACT. And for any listener today, you do need the SAT or ACT today. What changes are happening in society? So this young person is prepared with that education to go for it.
Okay, and I know we're getting short on time, but I don't want to let you go without asking you about the 650-word culmination of a student's entire life. If you've got a child that has one thing to write about, or 5 things, or child's looking at a blank page, how do you recommend approaching the essay?
Okay. And the essay, I would say, beyond just the acceptance rates and the price tags, both of you have had kids who've gone through this process. Probably the most anxiety-inducing, stressful part of college admissions, right? The personal statement. The prompts are so open-ended, and there's even a prompt, just write whatever you want. The way I like to explain it, I have my mom's old vinyls in my office. It's not the rushed greatest hits album of everything you've done under the sun, and you just listing accomplishment after accomplishment, or this is what I did, or this is my vanity project that didn't have an impact, but it looks really good because it's a 501c3. Don't do that. No one cares about that. Let me just say that. I could talk for 20 minutes about just that. But it's one vivid snapshot of your life that you then get to reflect upon from a growth standpoint. So there's no right or wrong topic. What we've been seeing a lot of great results in students admitted to schools that were like, wow, like, holy cow, that's like, where'd that come from? It's amazing. Or when kids are getting vulnerable about a moment and they're being authentic about something that maybe made them feel pretty darn bad for that moment, but then it sparks some growth or some reflection of how do they see the world now because of that moment of what they've encountered. It could be realizing like you didn't have a seat at the table and then working to find and establish her place in the world through a high school story. But there's something much more powerful about that when you think about it, given that a lot of us are always struggling to figure out like, how do I going to add to this world? I've had a student write about the indignation of someone mocking her parents' accents. They moved here from China. And I thought it's a line I can still vividly remember. It's like how the mom reads books, like textbooks on the markings of birds. So she can, when she goes bird watching, she can know every bird in San Joaquin. And I'm like, to show like that's intellect. Or how the dad reads the Wall Street Journal, even if he couldn't actually read the article to you because of his accent. I think we're always like, let's really sell it. Let's think about this as a cover letter when we're applying for that job at a law firm or whatever. No, it's like, this is who I am. And because of who I am and this one little experience, this is how I see the world. And I would say to anyone is take a step back and be like, am I getting to know you and see your perspective? It does not have to be an opus. Duke no longer takes into consideration the quality of the writing because there are too many people who do what I do, which is work with students on their essays, or because of AI. And so it's more, I always think it's like, what's the message rather than how does it read like The Great Gatsby with like such finesse? But are you actually being vulnerable and authentic with me? And am I getting to know you as a result? If I'm getting to know you, it could be a very minor moment, but that could be what puts you over the edge. And so I think we have to take a little bit of the pressure off of ourselves and say, okay, tell me a story where I can see how you see the world. And that's typically what I like to start with in the brainstorming with a student. And that's different for every person. I even look at your two daughters and like they had different experiences, but they're rooted in stuff you would not necessarily expect in high school. And then one where I'm like, okay, like you're writing about an activity, but it's much more than that. It's that, how does that activity make you feel? And that's what's priceless.
Well, I think for anybody fortunate enough to work with you, they get not only a great college counselor, insightful, but also, again, just a wonderful perspective on life and teaching our kids to be authentic so they can reach for their dreams, but don't sell themselves short. And I love that message that you're spreading to them. And just wanted to make sure, again, everybody knew your books are available, I'm assuming, on Amazon?
Yeah, they are.
Okay. So we have The Journey as well as Earning Admission by Greg Kaplan. We've loved having you. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Greg. Always great to talk to you. And to our listeners, thank you for joining for your recommended dose of civics and civilization in Orange County.
And we'll see you next time.